Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Art After Hours. I'm Shauna Robeson with Creating Space Coastal, and in this video, we are going to be doing a guided intuitive art journal project based on breathing or oxygen. This month is nourishment, and this is the project that I worked on in my journal. So if you'd like to see how I did it, stay tuned. Let's get started. The quote I have for today is, breathing in, I calm body and mind. Breathing out, I smile. Dwelling in the present moment, I know this is the only moment, by Thich Nhat Hanh. And that's a great reminder of how breathing can help us calm our system, which is ironic because oxygen is actually an important element in the process of unlocking energy in the nourishment that we eat. So you would think, okay, if you're going to unlock that power source, you'd think that it would activate you. Well, it does give us energy, but it also, when we have enough of it, our body calms down. You know, when we don't feel like we're getting enough oxygen, our heart starts pumping more. We start breathing faster because we're like, okay, we're not getting enough oxygen for what we need. So stress can cause us to, you know, breathe faster or get our heart rate up and things like that, because we are feeling like, okay, we got to fight or flight or something here. But when we are feeling stress, we can give ourselves more oxygen, more nourishment to our cells by just slowing down and taking some deep breaths. So keep that in mind. It's a nourishment of our mind, our whole body, oxygen is. And we want to keep those systems of our body that process oxygen and get it out to our tissues. We want to keep them healthy. So here's an example of, you know, what healthy lungs look like. They're not pretty, but they're a lot prettier than unhealthy lungs, right? And because they're hidden inside our bodies, we don't see when they're not doing so good. And so just like any organ or any system in our body, muscle, it's not really a muscle tissue. The heart is. This is the heart over here. But, you know, it's kind of a use it or lose it. Our bodies are really, really efficient systems. They look at what we do. It examines how we behave, and it adjusts our body's systems to work with what we do. So if we tell our body, hey, we just kind of lay around on the couch and we watch TV and that's all we need to do, our bodies are going to adapt and say, you know what, we're not going to use any more energy than we need to. All we need to do is, you know, lay here comfortably on the couch. And then suddenly we go out and we try to do stairs, and our body's like, well, hey, wait, you didn't tell me I had to do stairs. What are you doing? What are you trying to do to me? So our bodies adapt and adjust and shift the efficiency of our systems, our heart, our lungs, based on how we use them. So it's really important that we condition our systems, keep them efficient, and keep them functioning in a way that's going to support whatever we need to do, whether that's climbing stairs or cleaning the house or walking to the store. Whatever those things that we want to do in our life to maintain a healthy life, we need to make sure that our systems, our lungs, our heart are conditioned for that. And so here are some tips of ways to keep those systems running efficiently and healthy. One thing that is for both the heart and the lungs, of course, is activity, because when we use our lungs and use our heart to, you know, and push those systems a little bit, stress them by exerting ourselves, going upstairs or walking to the store or whatever it is, playing pickleball for me, we're saying, hey, we need to make sure that our body is conditioned for this activity, and our body will naturally adapt. That first time you go up those stairs after, you know, spending more time on the couch, that's going to be a real challenge, right? Our bodies are going to be in shock. They're going to be like, what are we doing? But after we do it repeatedly, our body's like, hey, I got this. We got you covered. We're ready for it. We can handle whatever you throw at us. As far as this activity. And then the more we throw at it, the more it conditions itself naturally because it's an amazing machine. So but we have to do our part in giving it what it needs to maintain that efficiency. Balanced nourishment. We're going to talk about that next week. We're going to talk more about, what we eat and having a nutrient dense diet in our bodies. So we'll talk about that then, but that's really important too. We got to make sure we give our body all the things we need. In this case, one of the nourishments that we bring in is oxygen. That's the nourishment that we breathing through respiration. So our hearts need that too, because the heart is the engine that sends all of those all that oxygen out to our cells. All the cells need oxygen, right? But we don't store oxygen. We have to get oxygen through active respiration, which is why if you stop breathing, you die. So, you want to keep breathing. That's really important. And so we want to make sure that that system is efficient, right? We want to make sure we're keeping that blood full of good nutrients that it's sending out, so it doesn't have to work harder to get it out to the rest of your body. You want plenty of water because water is a big constituent of blood, right? The liquid part of blood is water. You want plenty of sleep. You need rest because that's when your body does a lot of its replenishing and repair. Also, it's really important to reduce your stress because the more stress you put on your body, the more hormones and things that your body is going to produce that are maybe not needed and not healthy, because your body goes into that fight or flight and it says, oh no, we're in trouble. And it wants to act like you're in trouble. That heart rate goes up, but it's not being efficient. It's not doing anything other than working overtime. Healthy lungs. I talked about activity, of course. Now your lungs are not a muscle, but your diaphragm, which is below your lungs, is. And so as we practice breathing deeper, taking deep breaths, letting our diaphragm come out to open up those lungs, bring in that fresh air, you're not only bringing in a lot more oxygen because, like I said, the air is mixed with other things, but we want the oxygen. You're bringing more oxygen, but you're also pushing out more of that stagnant air that's already been depleted of its oxygen. Because once we absorb that oxygen, then it's just other gases that don't serve us. And we want to get those out. So get rid of the toxic, stagnant air, bring in that fresh oxygenated air back in. And the more that we can have bigger breaths, and through activity, we can push ourselves to take even bigger breaths and get more of that fresh air. Of course, you want to have an environment that's fresh and has clean air, getting out into nature areas, being away from smoke or smog or pollutants is always going to be better. If you're in an environment that has a lot of pollutants, wearing protective gear. If you work in an environment that has a lot of particulates, making sure you wear a respirator, things like that, taking care of those lungs. We can't see the lungs, so it's really easy to neglect them, but they're really important for sustaining our life. A balanced weight, when we have more body to get our nutrients out to, right? That's going to tax our lungs and our hearts more because we have to send it to more places further away from our core. And it taxes us. And there's, it taxes us in many different ways, but that's one way that it can reduce our efficiency of our heart and our lungs is just by making us push oxygen and nutrients further and further out away from our core body. Deep breathing exercises, practicing getting that diaphragm, opening up those lungs. Think of your lungs as little balloons. There's like little alveoli that can expand. So think of just filling those up, expanding those up, and the more you do that, the more it's be more efficient at holding more air, because it's like, oh, we need more oxygen. Okay, we got to make more passageways, and it's going to adjust accordingly. And of course, what we're struggling with this time of year is avoid respiratory illness. Of course, there's limits of what we can do with that when we have lots of viruses and colds and bacterial things that are out there, but doing our best to avoid those, of course, will keep us healthy lungs and getting that good oxygen that we need. All right, that's enough of my spiel. Today's writing exercise is you can either write a letter of gratitude to either your lungs or your heart for the work that it does, or think of ways that you may want to support the efficiency of your heart and lungs, and just write what comes to mind, or just write about oxygen in general, or I mean, anything related to oxygen you can, write about. On your mark, get set, and write. Okay, hopefully maybe you had some insights or some ideas of how to help be more efficient with your oxygen uptake and distribution throughout your body, and or just a moment of appreciation that you woke up today breathing, because sometimes we take that for granted. And I think it's important that we remember that no matter what else is going on in our lives, we can always take a moment for gratitude that we are breathing. Because if we are thinking about gratitude, we are alive and breathing. So that's going to always be an option. It's a good standby. It's a good standby thing of gratitude, I think. So the weekly theme is nourishment of air, or really O2. And the topic, of course, is breathing. And green is kind of a weird color, right? For breathing, I think of oxygen as blue. I don't know if it's really blue, but I think about the foliage in our world that creates oxygen, right? So trees and plants and everything, they produce oxygen. And so that kind of makes sense in that way. And so the pattern for today is also foliage, because the lungs actually kind of look like little trees. Like if you look at the little branches of alveoli, they look a little like a tree. And so I thought that was kind of a fun way to think about it. And so I kind of went down that path. The medium for today is water-based markers, or the random number generator 11. And then the tool or technique today is fussy cutting. And I'll talk more about that. And the collage material is coloring page. And so now I'm going to go through the things that I've gathered for these topics. All right, so for our prompts, I'm just going to go over the things that I pulled together, and then I'll explain what they are instead of trying to go in order of all the prompts. But the idea of oxygen or breathing really made me think about, and of course, foliage. This kind of covers a lot of ground. I found this in my search. Because really the lungs, like I said, they kind of look like trees if you look at how they look at the microscopic level. So that made me think of tree branches, because the air comes in and then it goes out and it's distributed to these little alveoli. And of course, they're not shaped like leaves, but because trees make oxygen, I thought that this was a great combination of where the oxygen comes from and then bringing it into our bodies. So this was just a fun image that I thought I would use for my color page. And then of course, it's important to have the heart getting that oxygen out to all of our body. So that came in there too. So anyway, this covered a lot of ground for my topic. So that's my color page. And the fussy cutting is going to be cutting around these leaf shapes. I want to have it really an interesting edge. So I'm going to use my favorite fussy cutting scissors. These are Fiskars, and they have the spring activation, and they are really, really sharp and really, really small. So I can really get into details around different images or different shapes. So that's why they're fussy cutting, because you're being fussy about how you cut it. And then I also have some blades, because I might do some cutouts with that too, if it's too hard to get in there with the scissors. And then with air, thinking about bubbles. So I brought some things related to maybe making some bubbles. Even though the pattern is foliage, I thought I could include some little, maybe around this little tree heart thing. I also had some stencils related to foliage. So I might do some texture with some of these. I am not real sure yet. I kind of liked this one because that looked a little like lungs too. And then I also brought these because this is kind of a leaf shape. This is my gel press little plates, mini plates, and this one's a leaf shape. So I might throw that in there. And then I was thinking about the background because I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to color it and I'm going to cut it out. And so I was trying to think about what colors I want the background to be. And this is going to be greens and then red. And so I was trying to think of a good background color. So maybe light blues. I pulled some light blues and yellows because I was thinking it might pop on the yellows. So we'll see how I don't know if I'm going to do a collage in the background or if I'm going to just do some pigment on the background with the markers. That's why I didn't want to write on there because I haven't decided that yet. And then I brought some other green things, but honestly, since I'm going to put the green in here, I don't really want to distract from that. So I think I'm not going to really end up using those. And then for the markers, I just have these really inexpensive, this was like one of those sets that are about 100 colors, and I've had them for probably a decade, honestly. And they're fiber color, so they're not fancy, they're just water-based. They're kind of probably similar to something like a Crayola marker. So you can use anything that's water-based. And if it's not marked as something else, then it's likely water-based because it's just like a typical coloring marker. So I'm going to be using some of those, not in purples, but those were the ones I grabbed. Let me just show you. I have it's kind of a marker bin, and I have these little toilet paper rolls that I just put in one of these tins. This was, I think, for carrying out like plates and things like that for picnic. But it works really well with these little toilet paper rolls in there to sort out all of my colors. So just a little storage tip. And just a reminder that Sharpies are not water-based. So you can use whatever you want. Of course, you don't have to follow what I'm doing, but if you do use Sharpies, just know that they're alcohol-based and they will bleed through your paper. So if you are using that, just make sure you put some kind of protective something underneath your main page so you don't get the ink across. And with those markers, I'm going to also be using some water brush pens. Now you can use just a watercolor brush if you want. You don't have to have the water brush pens, but the cool thing about these is that they fill with water. They have a reservoir that holds water. They have a tip that's actually brush bristles, and there's different sizes of these different tips. And so I have multiple options here with different sizes. And there's of course different brands. Here's some three different styles, but those are handy, and I'm going to be using those for some of my technique to get a watercolor effect for my coloring. I'm going to show you a couple different techniques for coloring with markers while we're at it. And I think I've covered most of what I pulled together. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is color my project. And so as I always do, I make a color chart of my markers. So this is the color chart of my fiber color. So I can just look on here. Now these pens did not have numbers or any kind of colors on them. And that makes it very difficult. See, it just says fiber color 100. It doesn't have any kind of unique identifier. So I actually took a Sharpie and wrote on there a number. It's kind of worn. You can use a label too, but I think it's helpful because now I can look at here and go, okay, this is number 9 and this is the color it is. Because if I look at this cap and I look at this color, that doesn't look anything like that. So you can't go by these plastic colors because it's a different, it's different colorant that's creating this plastic. So it's may not be representative of what the color is. Now, one technique that you can do with coloring to just make it a little more interesting is using 3 colors in the same color group. So, and I'm going to just do it off the side. This part I'm going to cut off. Oh, this tip isn't real good. That could be a problem. That's okay. I might be using it with the brushes. But so if I were to, let's say I'm doing a flower petal and I put the dark color, and then I can come in and I can blend with the next color. And then I can even blend that. So now I'm getting kind of a gradient, right? An ombre effect. And so you can do that with your, instead of just having a leaf be this color and just one dimension, now it's looks a lot more natural, right? With that gradient. So you just get a little bit more realism, if you want, if you will, or just a little more depth when you do it that way. So I could do that. Now, the problem is this is very small, so I'm not gonna be able to do that in those leaves with these big markers, right? But what I can do is I can use a brush. Let me show you an example of using this. So I can just put the ink right on any plastic surface, so palette or plastic plate. And then I can think of it like watercolor. So I can start with the darker color. And then I can go in with my medium color. And then go in with my lighter color. So I can kind of do some of that similar effect. And depending on the paper, this is going to behave differently on watercolor paper as opposed to, this is just a regular cardstock. It's not even a mixed media. So it's, you know, it's a little on the thicker side. It can handle a little moisture, but if your paper is real thin, it's not going to handle that water as much. So be careful, just use less water. I can still do it with just being very careful about how much water is on my brush, and I could still do it on these leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and do some leaves. And this allows me to just really have some detail. This fine tip. Now this particular water brush, sometimes the water brushes will start to leak a little bit. Like this one's putting out water that I don't want. And that's the difference between the dollar store water brushes and spending a little bit more. I find that yeah, see, it keeps putting a bead of water. That's not going to work. So I can just go to a regular watercolor brush because these brushes are big. So I'm just going to go to a watercolor brush because that was my smallest brush that I had, and I really want that detail. And so this will give me a little bit more control. Now in these small little areas, I'm going to fill up like some of these leaves in the middle, a little darker green, and then I'll lighten them as I go out. That'll just give it also some variation and depth. Created a gradient within the leaves as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I didn't add any of the textures, and I honestly don't think I want to do too much more. I think it tells the story that I wanted to tell. It's got my little air bubbles and just breathe, and the connection between oxygen making plants and our lungs and our heart. So yeah. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Healing Art After Hours. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment if you find this content helpful. And as always, happy creating. Bye.